Welcome to AP Environmental Science. In this video, we are going to focus in on three agricultural practices and the impacts that they have on the land and the environment. Now, the three that we're focusing in on are tilling, slash and burn agriculture, and the use of both organic and synthetic fertilizers. For each of these, you need to know a general description of what that particular practice is, along with the pros and the cons. Now, tilling is a process used in conventional large-scale agriculture, and this is a process that turns the soil upside down to integrate any crop residues or incorporate remaining trash from the stalks that remain after harvest back into the soil. And it's also used to help prevent any weed growth. Now there's benefits here because we are reducing any soil compaction that may have resulted from heavy machinery moving across that landscape during harvest. And it also encourages the decomposition of those remaining crop debris that were left over from harvest. This helps to recycle some of the nutrients quicker through that area. Now the drawbacks though is that this can increase the amount of erosion because we are disrupting that network of root structures in that particular location, and this allows the soil products to move a little bit more freely, be picked up by the wind, or moved by water. The next type is called slash and burn. Now this is not your conventional agriculture that you see throughout most of the United States. This is actually found in other parts of the world more commonly. And this process involves cutting down all of the trees and vegetation in a particular area and burning that material directly on that location. Now this produces an ash, and that ash adds a lot of nutrients to the soil. Now let's take a moment and think about where in the world does this happen? Well, if we have nutrient poor soil and warm climates, this tends to be somewhere pretty tropical, like a tropical rainforest type area. Now, this type of agriculture is not sustainable because after you cut down the trees and burn them in that area, you're adding that one single shot of extra nutrients, you're planting your crops, harvesting them, and now you don't have another way to replace those nutrients in that particular location unless you're using some type of fertilizers. But the thing is, the benefits, it's really inexpensive to do this initial cutting and burning, but it results in some very short-term productivity. Also, that process of burning is going to release carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide into the atmosphere. We're going to see erosion from this disturbed soil. And these particular areas tend to have a bit of irrigation issues where you're adding water to the surface of the soil. That irrigation can lead to salinization, which can then lead to desertification. So when you have desertified land, that means the land is no longer able to be productive for growing crops. The third and final type that we're talking about today is fertilizers. Now there are two types of fertilizers. We have organic and we have synthetic. In both cases, they are applied sometimes in large amounts depending on the situation, and they're applied to a field to replace nutrients that were lost from the previous year's crop. Now, organic fertilizers come from mostly decomposed manure. Synthetic fertilizers come from the combustion of natural gas to do some nitrogen fixation to make that nitrogen into a form that is available to the plants. Now, both processes are essentially doing the same thing of adding nutrients to the soil. One's just coming from manure, the other's coming from a synthetic or inorganic process. Now, there are pros and cons to the use of fertilizers, and we're talking about both organic and synthetic are going to have a lot of the same pros and cons. Now, the benefits of using fertilizers is that they can be easily absorbed by the plants, and the content of the fertilizers can be adjusted and targeted so that way you are only replacing the certain nutrients that were consumed or lost from that previous year's crop. Now, fertilizers are expensive. Farmers do not want to apply more than they have to. And without having all of these fertilizers applied to our crops, there's a very high likelihood that we would not be able to meet the demands to feed the world, especially because the amount of cropland that's available has been rapidly decreasing in recent years. Now, there are people who will argue that if we do innovative farming techniques, we could still meet that need without fertilizers. However, it takes a lot of creativity and will take many, many years before we reach that point. Now, there are drawbacks, and the drawbacks of using synthetic fertilizers is that we rely on fossil fuels to produce them, but organic fertilizers also rely on fossil fuels for applying them to the field. If either organic or synthetic fertilizers are over applied, there's potential that they could run off into groundwater and surface water. Now, again, fertilizer is expensive, so farmers are only going to put out the very minimum that they have to. And with synthetic fertilizers, you are not adding any organic material, so that would be a drawback. Now, in summary, you do need to know these three agricultural practices and how they could result in environmental damage. So, tilling, slash and burn, and fertilizers. Make sure you know both pros and cons of each. Please leave me your questions here at the end, and I hope that as you watch this video, you were able to learn something.